The smallmouth bass is one of the most fun species of fish to catch, as they are known for their aggression when they bite and the intense fight after. But just as they can be incredibly aggressive one day, they can be stubborn and impossible to catch the next, especially if you're throwing the wrong lure. So in today's video, I'm gonna break down my top 5 smallmouth bass lures for anywhere in the country so that you can go out to your river or lake and have confidence in what you're throwing. My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all. I can't believe what I just caught. Yes! Well, what's going on, folks? Welcome back to Tyler's Real Fishing. My goal is to help you become a better angler and catch more fish, and sometimes I get to sit down and just talk about tackle. That's what today's video is all about. Now, all the tackle I'm going to talk about here is linked down in the video description. Those are affiliate links. So if you shop on Tackle Warehouse, please click those links, because what it does is it tracks your entire purchase, not just the item that I linked. You can click a stinking split ring and buy a trolling motor for all I care. But as long as you enter Tackle Warehouse through any of the links down there in the description, you are helping me and my family continue to make a living. I would really appreciate it. Now, before I tell you my list of 5 lures, we need to talk about smallmouth bass as a species first. First, they have smaller mouths. That should be a given. When they can, they prefer to live in clearer water as opposed to dirty. In some lakes and rivers, they don't have a choice, but if given the choice, they're gonna go to the clean water. And because they prefer to live in clear water, more often than not, smallmouth bass are sight feeders. That means they use their eyes to feed, not necessarily just their senses. And so because they're sight feeders, your lures generally have to look or be presented in a more realistic way. Now, smallies can be caught on practically every single lure that can also catch a largemouth. Chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, topwaters, jigs, crankbaits, you name it. But while the standard pond fishing lures might work for largemouth bass, oftentimes there are many scenarios in which those lures are not as effective or efficient for smallmouth bass. So I'm gonna give you my top 5 list of smallmouth bass fishing lures that honestly you at home may totally disagree with, and that's to be expected, because smallmouth bass, especially from lake to lake, are incredibly nuanced. The way they live their lives, the way they feed, the location of which they spawn is totally different from lake to lake. I'm filming this on the shores of Lake Michigan, one of the Great Lakes. These smallmouth, as compared to the ones at Kentucky Lake, act totally different. But after catching smallmouth in I think 13 states at this point, I have a lot of information that I've compiled together into a list of 5 that I think are gonna help you. And so I'm gonna talk about 3 honorable mentions first though, and then we're gonna get into the 5. An honorable mention number 1 is the jig head minnow. The reason why I'm putting this in the honorable mention category is because it's just not that effective for the majority of people probably watching this video. The jig head minnow can work when shaken from a pond or from the shore, but for the most part, it is a forward-facing sonar only technique. And so for most of us who don't have live scope, or most of y'all watching the video who probably don't have it or don't want to use it, I'm not going to include it in my top 5 lures because, again, it works fantastic. For you out there, it might be the best smallmouth lure, but for the majority of people watching this video, it's probably not even close. And my second honorable mention, and honestly this might ruffle a few feathers, is the shallow diving crankbait category. And the reason why I'm putting this one in honorable mention, even though I know for a lot of you guys that fish in current situations, in small streams and rivers, is that most of us don't fish there. And not only do most anglers not fish in rivers, I would say even in a river, most smallmouth are not at a location that's accessible to a shallow diving crankbait. It is a very onesie-twosie type of technique. But if you have the right conditions, let's say shallow rock or shallow sand in a river with a little bit of current, a shallow diving crankbait can work fantastic. But for the rest of us, it's probably worth putting these away and throwing something else. And my third honorable mention is the marabou hair jig. This one right here is an absolute smallmouth bass slayer, and there are times when no other lure in my entire boat can get smallmouth to eat besides this. But with that being said, it's incredibly specific and very seasonal. The smallmouth have to be in ultra shallow water. I'm talking 5 feet of water or less. The water has to be crystal clear, and the gear you have to throw it is even more specific, like a 7/6 medium light rod, super thin braided line, and a really thin fluorocarbon leader is needed to effectively fish with a tiny, I think it's like a 3/32 ounce marabou hair jig. And so does this catch smallmouth? Absolutely, but does it belong on the top 5 list? No. So now it's finally time for my top 5 lures in order of most applicable to the everyday angler to least applicable, but again, if it made the list, it's pretty dang efficient. Number 1 being the Dropshot. Now, why is the Dropshot my #1 lure on my list for smallmouth bass fishing? And that is because it is the most versatile. It can be fished shallow, it can be fished deep, it can have big worms or small worms. And in my 5 years of traveling on the Bass Pro Tour, the MLF Tour, I have seen so many pros fish this thing for smallmouth far and above any other lure. And you know, most anglers watching this video, the way that you can probably access the smallmouth close to your house is in a lake or a reservoir, not necessarily just in a river. And so again, if most bass anglers access smallmouth in a lake, and a Dropshot is what most pro anglers fish in lakes, it's probably the best lure for that, and I've verified that in all my travels across the country as well. Smallies are also more of a pelagic type of fish, which means that they travel across the water column to feed and eat. And so the fish are used to going up and down, and so a Dropshot with the weight on the bottom and your worm higher up in the water column is great because a smallmouth is used to looking up and feeding up anyways. Now, a Dropshot can be Texas rigged, it can be threaded, or it can be nose hooked. And in this video, I'm not going to go over the details on how to rig this thing because I've made a Dropshot masterclass video that I think at this point has like over 500,000 views. It's helped a lot of people learn how to fish a Dropshot. I will leave that link down in the video description if you want to watch it. Now, you might think, Tyler, if the Dropshot weight is 1/8 ounce and the worm is a 6-inch straight tail worm, why can't I just make a Texas rig out of it with an 1/8 ounce bullet weight on the front of my worm? And to be honest, you probably could, but I've just found for the most part, if I'm going to throw a Dropshot style of worm, again, a straight tail, this one here being the Strike King filler worm, I catch more fish on a Dropshot rigging of it than a Texas rig. That's just my personal anecdotal evidence, but I think it's true. And another reason why this thing lands at #1 on my list is because you can fish it anywhere. You can fish it in 6 inches of water or 35 feet, heck, 100 feet, I guess technically, which I know is a huge range of where you can fish a Dropshot, but I have found that in all those depth zones, rock or hard bottom is the best place to throw a Dropshot, but it can work in grass. And a Dropshot can work well for you guys who fish for smallies in rivers, but it just requires a little bit of a different rigging. So, of course, a weedless presentation is necessary if you're gonna fish successfully in rivers and not get snagged all the time. And then there's an interesting debate to be had on whether you should go lighter weight or heavier weight. Heavier weight obviously helps to keep your Dropshot down in the current down there on the bottom, but Dropshot weights and current get stuck like crazy, and so a lighter weight can kind of help the Dropshot drift along the current. So you got to find what works on your body of water and be willing to lose a few setups. So that'll do it for the Dropshot. Again, I will have all my tackle linked down in the video description. Let's move on to lure #2 on my list, and that is the standard paddle tail swimbait. Now, Tyler, why do you just show me a black swimbait? Is that really the color you recommend? I'm going to address that here in a second, but smallmouth bass, for the most part, as a pelagic species, are really feeding on bait fish. Not to say they can't eat gobies, of course, here in the Great Lakes region. They can't eat crawfish. We're going to talk about that here in a second, but for the most part, just keep in mind, smallmouth love bait fish. And honestly, the smaller the swimbait you can throw, the better, because oftentimes those fish are feeding on very, very small bait fish. But I would say anywhere from 2 to 4, maybe just over 4 inches is the prime size range for a soft plastic jig head swimbait. Any smaller and it's really tough to throw, any larger, and again, their mouths are small, it's tough for them to get their mouth around the swimbait and whatever hook you have on there. And these types of swimbaits can be rigged weedless, but for the most part, you're fishing it up in the water column away from all the snags down there on the bottom, and so you don't need to go weedless. And if I can go with a non-weedless presentation over a weedless one, I'm gonna go with the non-weedless 10 out of 10 times. These kind of swimbaits can be rigged weedless, but for the most part, I'm fishing this thing here up in the water column away from all the snags and stuff to get stuck on down there on the bottom. And so a jig head swimbait like you see here really has been for all of history and probably will be going forward the best way to present a soft plastic swimbait in the water column and have the best hookup ratio possible. Now, the best sizes as far as the jig head is concerned, I would say for open water, 1/16, 1/8, and maybe 1/4 ounce is the heaviest I would go for open water. I like to take my time with this thing, which may require being patient, letting it sink down there in the water column, but the lighter I can go, the more I can manipulate my swimbait, and especially the more natural it looks. And the best size jig heads for current, I would say, just kind of go up one size. So your 1/8 ounce, your 1/4 ounce, maybe a 3/8 if it's really, really heavy current. Any heavier than that, and you're probably losing jig heads down there in the rocks. And as far as retrieve goes, cast it out there, count it down a few seconds, and reel it straight back in. Now, I said I was going to discuss the black color. For smallmouth bass, sometimes stuff that is off the wall, it really gets their attention, gets them to bite. Smallmouth are very curious creatures. Occasionally, the curiosity can actually make them bite it. Oftentimes, it just causes them to come check it out and then turn away. And a black swim bait, for whatever reason, can catch some dang smallmouth. I don't throw black hardly at all unless I'm in the Great Lakes region, but if you're in really clear water and you have fish following your swim bait and they will not eat a standard shad pattern, try something off the wall, and black is a great one that I've had success on. So the jig head swim bait, an oldie but a goodie, that is number 2 on my list. Moving on to number 3 for smallmouth bass all across the country, and that is the treble hooked topwater. If it's late spring to late fall, there is no better lure category, in my opinion, of finding out quickly and in the most fun way possible if smallmouth bass are in a certain shallow area than a topwater. Now, this category is the first one on my list that is not a finesse type of lure, and the reasoning for that is because I think smallmouth bass, for the most part, are a finesse-oriented fish. You gotta throw finessey stuff to catch them, especially with the amount of anglers we have fishing our lakes nowadays, going more and more finesse, more and more JDM, you could say Japanese, is the way to catch more smallmouth. But a topwater does belong on this list, and I think it belongs at number 3 because it's so dang fun. And the reason why I say treble hook topwaters is because with the aggression a smallmouth bass can come up to the top of the water and hit your bait, oftentimes they will miss. And so throwing a treble hooked bait allows you to, I wouldn't use the term snag necessarily, but they're coming up to eat it and they miss it, but they get a hook on the outside of their mouth or maybe barely on the inside as they head back down, and you have that fish hooked. And so that's why I recommend a treble hook topwater over ones that are not, like a topwater frog and a buzzbait. Have I caught smallmouth on frogs and buzzbaits? Yes, I have. But for the most part, I have a better hookup ratio and therefore a better fishing experience by fishing treble hook topwaters as opposed to non-treble hook topwaters. Now, in this category, we have the popper, we have the walking bait, and we have the plopper style. I don't know honestly which one I like most. I'm probably going to eliminate popper. I don't have nearly as much success on that one as I do these two right here. And you can cover more water faster with the plopper style, but I've caught some giants on a walking bait, and a walking bait is great because as you're working it, if a smallie comes up and explodes on it and misses, you can keep it almost right there in place as you walk it side to side. A plopper, you can stop it and I guess it will not move, but then the tail isn't doing any kind of action until you start retrieving it again. So the walking bait I think is better for maybe fish that are schooling or are more target oriented. A plopper is great for just casting long distances and covering water down the bank. So treble hook topwaters, some absolute dang fun. That's number 3. Number 4 on my list is the Ned rig in the tube. Now, I'm sure some of y'all right now are absolutely appalled that I would have the Ned rig in the tube at number 4 on the list, but a hill that I will die on is that a smallmouth will eat a drop shot more often than they will eat a Ned rig, especially more often than they'll eat a tube. Now, of course, are there situations in which a tube is better, a Ned rig is better? Yes, but I'm talking about generalities here, and a Ned rig and tube belong at number 4. They also belong in the same category because the build of them is almost identical. They both have a jig head, although the tube jig head is inside the tube, and they both have a hook sticking out, making it a non-weedless presentation. You can weedless a Ned rig, you can weedless a tube, but for the most part, as they are intended, as they were designed, they are not weedless. And honestly, the non-weedlessness of these lures is probably why they fell to number 4, because most anglers out there don't have access to the Great Lakes, where there's a ton of open water with hard, clean bottom to not get snagged on. And honestly, even out here, I get tubes and Ned rigs stuck all the time. And so because both of these are a small piece of soft plastic with a heavy jig head that is not weedless at all, it is a risky game to play to fish a Ned rig in a tube for the majority of us, unless you know exactly what the bottom composition is like on your body of water. Now, as far as what a tube and a Ned rig represent, I would say for the most part they are imitating very, very small perch or crawfish, especially crawfish. I'm thinking about Lake Mille Lacs, Lake of the Woods in Ontario, especially tons of the lakes down south in Texas that have smallmouth, and Alabama. It is mostly a crawfish imitation lure. But the body body of water I'm sitting on right here is Lake Michigan, and the Ned rig imitates gobies a ton in this body of water because that's a huge part of a smallmouth's forage. But if you fish a river or a lake that has majority bait fish eating smallmouth, a Ned rig is probably not even the best category of lure for you anyways. I would go with a shad-shaped Dropshot worm, or of course a Swimbait. That's why they're 1 and 2. But of course, test all these things for your body of water because you may find that my recommendations are good, but they're just in the wrong order. So the Ned rig, the tube, that is number 4. Let's move on to my final lure that I recommend. Again, it's the least efficient for most anglers, but it still is pretty dang good, and that is the suspending jerkbait. As I held them up, they were all tangled, but these things are bass catchers. And there are times of the year when a suspending jerkbait is the first and the only lure I have tied on for smallmouth bass fishing, and that is because it is really, really effective where it shines most, which is in clear water and especially clear, cold water. And because of those conditions, that's why it lands at number 5 on my list, because nobody wants to fish in the cold, clear water. But if your body of water has those conditions, this thing can be absolutely lights out. Now, it also struggles in current, in river situations. It just gets caught up and you can't really work it effectively. It doesn't look quite right. And so I'm not saying you can't throw a suspending jerkbait in a river or in current, but it's just mostly good for clear lakes. And it oftentimes catches the exact same fish that a swimbait would catch. And so with this bait having 2, sometimes 3 treble hooks hanging down there on the bottom, again, it is a accident waiting to happen when it comes to fishing around, especially suspending timber and really just a lot of snaggy stuff down there on the bottom. A jerkbait is great at catching. Man, I feel like I've spent the entire segment here trashing on the suspending jerkbait. It is a fantastic lure. It's just not the best one. It's on the list, but it winds up at number 5 because I feel like for most of y'all targeting smallmouth, it is not the one you need to be picking up first the majority of the time. Now, as far as colors go for a suspending jerkbait, this one here, I'll have it linked below, the exact color. I don't know what it's called, but it has chartreuse on the bottom. It is a clear shad in the middle, has some purple on the top. Practically every brand of jerkbait makes this color. But like I mentioned, smallmouth bass like funny color things, especially when they're twitching all over the place in the water column and getting their attention. That's why Siren is a fantastic smallmouth color, and I've caught some dang big smallmouth bass on straight pink. And I feel like as far as discussing the colors of smallmouth bass fishing lures, they should be either supernatural, green pumpkins, watermelon colors, translucent for shad, or crazy off the wall like pinks and chartreuses. Now, like I said, my list of 5, or at least the order of which I choose them, might not be the exact ones that work for you, but if you're struggling to catch smallmouth bass on your body of water, make sure to give these 5 lures a try. As always, my stuff is linked down in the video description. Please shop for your tackle using those links. If you want to watch my Dropshot Masterclass video, it'll be a clickable video up here in this corner, and a video that I recently put out combining the Dropshot and the Ned rig super crazy challenge over here in this corner. My name is Tyler. As always, it's a pleasure, and we'll see y'all next time right here on TRF.